Hello, my name is Hillary, and I'm going to share with you guys about our journey through a high-risk pregnancy. I have shared quite a bit on various social media platforms, but I realized recently that I've not captured kind of the whole experience from beginning to now in one space. I've done that for myself in written form. I've done a lot of journaling, but I've not done it in video format. I thought I would take time to do that for a couple of reasons. One, part of the reason I've been sharing about my journey through this pregnancy is to help other parents who've gone through similar situations feel seen, heard, and understood. Also I don't like using the word normalize. We don't want to normalize this experience per se. It's not normal, but normalize talking about it, talking about difficult pregnancies, talking about all of the emotions that come with that and the challenges that come with that. This is also kind of a part of my grieving process. In a way, it's helping me to process everything. So here we go. I found out that I was pregnant in October, and that was such a whirlwind. Oh my goodness. This is truly how the story goes. People are going to laugh so hard at this who have known me forever, but we went to church and I just started feeling so dizzy and lightheaded. I thought that I had just had too much coffee, thought that my blood sugar was low because I hadn't really eaten. Had to leave the service, was in the restroom, kind of just gathering myself, and texted my husband, and I said, I just feel awful. I feel so nauseous. I feel so off. He said, okay, well, just take your time. No big deal. Do you need me to bring you anything? I said, I've got a headache. I think I might just need some Advil. He got me some Advil. I went back to my seat. Had to leave again because I just felt awful. And I told him, I said, this is so weird. Maybe I'm about to start my cycle. I checked my app. I was late, which never happened. And if it did happen, it was not by 4 or 5 days. We were headed to lunch with some friends after church, and I said, let's not jump to any conclusions. Let's, just get me something to eat, go to lunch, and we'll maybe grab a test and take a test when we get home. So we got in the car, we went and got me a smoothie before we went to lunch. And I took 2 sips of the smoothie, immediately felt nauseous as soon as we got on the highway. I said, you're gonna have to pull over, I'm gonna throw up in this car. And he said, well, please don't throw up in the car. He pulled over on the side of the highway. I threw up, got back in the car, made sure I didn't have anything on my face. And Josh said, all right, tell me what you need. I'm going to get you a test right now. And so on our way to lunch, we stopped, bought some tests, and it was absolutely freaking hysterical because he ran into CVS so that I could stay in the car and just breathe for a minute because I felt so bad. And at CVS, he picked up 2 different types of pregnancy tests and pads and tampons. He's such a winner. The lady at the register goes, good luck. I just left it at that. Anyway, so we get to lunch and I put one of the tests in my bag and I look at my husband and I said, all right, I'll be right back. And he goes, you're gonna do this now? And I said, well, either I'm having a beer at lunch or I'm not. So yeah, I'm going to do this now. Texted him the positive pregnancy test from the restaurant bathroom. And that was that. And I remember thinking before I went to test, I told him, I said, I'm really nervous because I'm afraid it's gonna be negative, but we weren't necessarily planning this, but I have a feeling that if this is negative, I'm gonna be sad. We knew we wanted more kids, but we weren't necessarily taking measures against having more children, but we weren't trying either. But I told him, I said, this is a shock for sure, but if this is negative, I think I'm gonna be disappointed. And it was positive, and we were both in shock, but so elated. It was just the perfect, we knew this was what the Lord had planned for us. We, told our parents, told our close friends, all the things. I got through my first trimester pretty well. I had a pretty easy first trimester with the exception of fatigue, but overall it was a different pregnancy than my first one for sure. But throughout the first trimester, I would not say it was more difficult than my first pregnancy by any means. Everything went smoothly. We did 2 genetic test screenings. We did the maternal 21, I believe it was, and the AFP test. Both came back totally fine. Our ultrasounds, everything was normal. A strong heartbeat. We found out she was a girl. When we did our initial genetic screenings, picked out her name, so excited. Everything was fine. I actually had switched practices in the beginning of my pregnancy because of a few reasons. One, I wanted a bit of a smaller practice because I wanted to have a guarantee that my doctors would deliver me, which I did not have at my previous practice. And so the doctor that delivered my son, I had no idea who she was, and I didn't want to have that experience again. So I wanted to switch to a smaller practice, but I also wanted to switch because the practice that I am at now, at the time, it was the only practice that was still allowing visitors. So it was the only one where Josh was allowed to come with me. So he came for one visit to see an ultrasound and to hear heartbeat. And then right before we were supposed to go to my next visit, they said because of the rise in Omicron, visitors are no longer allowed. And I was just petrified because my ultimate fear was that I would go to an appointment and find out something horrible and be by myself. And we just looked at each other, when they made that decision. I remember them making that decision like the day before I had an appointment. And he was just like, it is what it is. And there was no switching practices at that point, right? Like we just knew that we had to wait it out and just felt confident that if any practice was going to lift that, it would be them first. We were confident in that. I went to one visit by myself, everything was fine. And then the next visit after that was scheduled to be the anatomy scan. They were still not allowing visitors of any kind, which was shocking to me because that is normally, when people confirm gender. And I called to ask and they said, no, they were not allowing any visitors or spouses or anything like that. So I just, took a deep breath and knew that I was going to be going by myself and just did. So anatomy scan day came. It was first thing in the morning. And Josh was at home with our 4-year-old. He was working from home. I went into my appointment, went back, did the ultrasound, and I remember feeling like the ultrasound was going longer, but it had also been, over 4 years since I had been pregnant. And so I just kind of was like, nah, maybe I just don't remember. But I did kind of have this like gut feeling that the ultrasound was going longer than it should have. But she was, we were having great conversation. I didn't get any kind of inclination that she was concerned about anything. Marcelly was moving everywhere. Her heartbeat was super strong. I could feel her moving in my belly. And so I honestly thought that the ultrasound was going longer because she couldn't be still. That's what I kind of thought. And so yeah, she gave me some pictures. She printed them out. I went to the waiting room and I texted my family in a group text. So I sent them the picture, said, here's her picture. She looks beautiful. Her heart rate was awesome. She was moving all over the place, blah, blah, blah. And I had also texted Josh's mom and I had texted my grandmother the same thing. Within a couple minutes, they called me back, which I was a little shocked about that it didn't take as long, because the first time that Josh and I did, like the last time we had done an ultrasound, it took forever for us to get called back. And so I do remember being like, oh my gosh, like that was such a quick turnaround, great. Like maybe this won't take very long. They put me in the room and the nurse that, they always have a nurse that sees you before the doctor sees you to take your vitals. And I remember her being a little bit awkward and asking, I don't know if she knew anything, but she asked me if I had any concerns, which they always ask you. And I remember thinking that I had had belly pain a few days before, like umbilical pain, which I was just nonchalant, like, yeah, this has been bothering me. And she said, well, when he comes in, you can let him know. And then she just walked out. But I just wrote that she had kind of this like, it was just awkward. I remember it being awkward. The doctor came in within, 2 minutes, like so quickly. I actually was in the process when he came in. I was in the process of putting together a Facebook photo album for Marcelly to document the pregnancy, which I had done also for my son. And when he walked in, I immediately, closed my phone. And I had not met him before because, like I said, it was a new patient, so I'm still in the process of meeting all the doctors. So he introduced himself. He has his mask on, right? So all I can see are his eyes. And he looks at me and he says, hi, I'm Dr. So-and-so. I have to tell you that we have some concerns about your baby's brain. I was in shock. I honestly, at first, when the words started coming out of his mouth, I was like, is he kidding? Not kidding, not joking. Like, is he just kind of being playful and introducing himself? Like, I couldn't process, right? And then it hit me because he kept talking and he kept saying words that I recognized. So I'm a former pediatric physical therapist. I have a doctorate in physical therapy. I'm very familiar with, anatomy, physiology, all of it. And he started saying a lot of words that I recognized and a lot of words that were really frightening. And I just kept nodding. I didn't say anything, but he looked at me and he said, what do you do? I said, what do you mean? He looked at me and said, what do you do? And I said, oh, well, I used to be a developmental pediatric physical therapist. Why? And he just said, that he could, I guess, tell based on how I was responding that I knew what he was saying. And so I told him, I said, I need you to be upfront with me. I need you to be honest with me. Do not withhold information. Tell me what you're saying. I understand. I'm following. Please be straight up with me. He proceeded to tell me that he saw what looked like some abnormalities in the posterior portion of her brain, so the back part of her brain where her cerebellum was. He also said that he noticed some increased fluid in the ventricular space, and he said that he was concerned about some things that he was seeing kind of in her. He wasn't sure, he was very vague about it, but possibly in her back or pelvis, but basically just hinting at like there were multiple systems involved here, that this was serious. And I just was shocked. Shocked. And I looked at him and the only thing I could come out of my mouth was, did I do something wrong? And I knew I hadn't, but that, that's just where your mom brain goes. And he was just like, no, look, like we just need to get you to the next step here. And the next step is for you to go down to perinatal. He said, I have already called perinatal. They are expecting you. They're downstairs. You just have to go register, but they are expecting you. You can go down immediately. They can see you today. I fully anticipate you will have many, many more scans done and, lots of ultrasound imaging. You will probably have to do an amniocentesis. And by the way, I believe that their visitor policy is the same as ours right now. So I don't think that your husband can be with you. And he was not saying that to be rude. He was preparing me, and I knew that he was. He was like, I'm just trying to prepare you. You can do this. Let's get you where you need to be. And I greatly respected him for that. I purposefully ended up, for our next OB visit, I requested to see him specifically because of how he handled this situation. He did not send me home. He did not, he was very adamant that I was gonna get seen that day and not have to go home terrified. He escorted me out to the lobby so that I wouldn't be bothered. And I went to the hall and called Josh, and he didn't answer at first because he was on conference call. I told him it was an emergency, and he picked up the second time, and I was trying so hard not to cry, but I was just like, something's wrong with the baby. Something's wrong with her brain. I have to go get testing done. I'm probably gonna have to do an amniocentesis. I don't know how long this is gonna take. I don't know when I'm gonna be home. And you can't come with me. And he was just like, he was just floored. I mean, both were. And he said, I know I can't be there, but I'm here. I'm here if you need me. I will turn everything off. I will turn all of my work off. I will be here. Call me when you get where you're going. Before I ended up registering, I like got turned around because my brain was so foggy. I remember being like, where am I supposed to go? Called my dad. I updated him because I want somebody to know, because I was getting text messages, you know, from my family thread asking how everything went. Called my dad, updated him, and then I went and registered and I went into perinatal. I think it was probably like 11. It was maybe 11:30 by this time, and I think my original appointment was at like 9:30, 9:45. So it had been a minute by this point. And they called me back. The tech started the ultrasound, and we did an ultrasound for over, I'm pretty sure it was an hour. Like, we did another hour of ultrasound imaging with me by myself. This ultrasound tech being very, very quiet. There was not much conversation to be had. He actually asked me, you know, what I knew. I guess kind of like screening to see how detailed she could or could not be with me. And we finished the ultrasound. She was still moving. She was still, you know, kicking, doing all the things. And the tech said, I'm gonna step out. I'm gonna go grab the perinatal specialist. I said, okay. She came back in 2 seconds later and she said, is your husband with you? I said, no. She said, oh, well, is he like in the car? Do you wanna go grab him? And I said, no, ma'am, I was told that he could not be with me. So he's at home with our 4-year-old. He's not here. And she said, oh, okay. Typically, you know, yeah, our policy is visitors are not allowed, but sometimes she makes an exception. And that was when it hit me. I was like, this is bad. This is my worst nightmare coming to reality. I opted to have Josh on speakerphone because there was no way he was going to be able to make it to, you know, the hospital. It was going to, like, he had Liam. He wasn't going to be able to drop him off and then, you know, at his mom's and then come see me. So he was on speaker. The perinatal specialist came in and she went over all of her findings, which I understood every single word she was saying. She identified and confirmed the abnormality in her cerebellum, which was called Dandy Walker. We did not know at that time whether it was Dandy Walker malformation or what they call a Dandy Walker variant, but the findings were similar to that kind of pattern. There's a couple different things involved with it, but essentially it just means that the cerebellum is not formed appropriately. Confirmed her ventricles were enlarged with fluid. It was mild at that time, and also confirmed some abnormalities in her pelvis and that one of her kidneys was not functioning. She laid all of it out. She went over it in detail. She was very thorough, absolutely wonderful. You know, Josh is on speakerphone the whole time. And then she said, so here kind of, you know, here's kind of where we're at. Do you have any questions? We said no. You know, as far as like we understood everything that she was saying. She said, before we proceed, I have to ask you, would termination be on the table? Immediately, I said no. I knew it was a no for both of us. But I never, I think about that a lot, like that moment and how standstill that moment was, because, I mean, y'all gotta think, like, I went into this appointment earlier that morning with everything being fine. And in that moment, a couple hours later, this doctor is like, is termination on the table? Totally floored. And especially floored because Josh was not with me for that moment. He was on speakerphone, but he was not physically present with me. And I never in my life, I never imagined that I would ever be in that position. And I feel so much for women who have ever been in that position. No mother should ever have to be in that position. It is so traumatizing. So she was very respectful. She did not push. She accepted our decision very gracefully. We have not been asked about it since, which has been a blessing. We've not felt pressured in any way. She said, okay, so here's our path forward. We can stop here and you can just wait out the entire pregnancy. And we were like, no, we want to know everything we possibly can. And she said, perfect. So the next step is an amniocentesis and we can do it today. I said, that's a big needle. We opted for me to take a break so that Josh could take Liam to his mom's. We could meet up for lunch. I could kind of mentally prepare, and then that way he could be with me for the procedure. So Josh had to take Liam to his mom's, and I was waiting for him. I beat him to kind of our meeting spot. And I remember sitting in the car and like having my mask off and just being like, oh my gosh, I can finally freaking breathe. And I just broke down in the car. Called my dad again, chatted with him, waited for Josh to get there. We got lunch, went back, and we did the amniocentesis right then and there. I'm trying to, that's such a blur. I'm trying to think of details. Just remember us being in there together and me being up on the table, Josh holding my hand, and he stood up and he was on the same side as the doctor. This part's actually kind of funny. So he was standing on the same side as the doctor, and she's like little bitty. She's like my size, and Josh is, you know, a big dude. And she kind of looks up at him and she says, sir, I'm gonna need you to just sit down in that chair. And he was like, okay, I mean, that's fine, I'm sorry. I mean, she goes, no, like you're totally fine. I just, I can't catch you. Like she goes, if you go tumbling, I can't catch you. You're gonna wanna sit down. And I had warned Josh, I said, this is a big needle, babe. Like, I'm not gonna be able to look at it. I'm just gonna be focused on trying to relax during this whole process. But I'm warning you, it's a big needle. You might not want to look at it. And he did anyway. And after the procedure was done, I remember him going, that was not a needle, that was a sword. Which, like, I'm trying to find the humor in the little moments that I can, right? Anyway, I'm on my back, right? And they've got the ultrasound going, trying to figure out where Marcelly is laying so that they can insert the needle. And I mean, there's not much, it's a little bit of a stressful procedure because, you know, there's not a lot of room in there. So I remember her sticking the needle in my belly and trying to talk to me, trying to distract me and asking me questions. And at one point I looked at Josh and I said, can you please answer these questions? I am not in a position to be answering anything right now. I just need to focus on my breathing. But they're asking me questions like, how did you guys meet? Where'd you go to high school? All this stuff. And I'm like, I have a sword in my belly. Stop talking to me. Like, just stop. We got through that procedure smoothly. There were no complications. The doctors are great. And we got some cookies after that, some crumble cookies. Shout out to Crumble, because we get crumble cookies now after every single appointment, and they're stellar. We picked up Liam and we went home. And I sobbed. I just lost it. Like, I don't even remember the rest. I don't remember the rest of that night at all. I barely remember the next day. I think we took Liam to therapy the next day. I think we got lunch after that. It was all a blur, like a complete blur. I ended up calling my OB that week to start medication that we were already considering because I was having some symptoms of anxiety and depression. We went ahead and started that prescription that week. But that week was such a blur. Such a freaking blur. So that was week 1. There were 3 weeks between the amniocentesis and the day that we got the results back for the amniocentesis. We got the results back for that right before we went back to visit perinatal again. And we only told, but in that time, we only told like close family and friends. And it was so much. I mean, just, there were so many emotions. I think we were both still in a bit of shock. You know, they talk about like 5 stages of grief. And typically when they talk about the 5 stages of grief, they talk about denial, because originally the 5 stages of grief were designed to be patient focused, like for patients who were experiencing their own death. And it's since been applied across the board for grief, but for us, it wasn't necessarily denial as much as it was just shock. Like I kept waking up, I guess a little bit of denial, because I kept waking up, you know, in the morning thinking that like it was all a bad dream. Like I would just wake up and everything was fine. Like that didn't happen. But it did. And 3 weeks later, we went back to perinatal. We got the results back from the amnio for the microarray and the karyotype test, kind of the first line of defense in genetic testing. And everything came back normal. Which was, you know, like good, but also we didn't have any answers. So at that appointment with perinatal, that appointment actually went well. Her fluid in her brain at that time was stable. Her kidney actually at that time was fairly stable, and nothing had really changed. You know, there were really no significant changes. She was stable, and she was moving, and her heartbeat sounded great, and she was growing. And so we had a lot of hope after that appointment. But we were set up. The next step after that was to do fetal MRI and whole exome sequencing genetic testing. I guess that's kind of phase 1.